In 2015, a ground scan in Poland revealed something that wasn't supposed to be there, a shape buried deep beneath layers of earth, long, metallic, and structured in a way that didn't match anything natural. It wasn't irregular like rock formations, and it wasn't scattered like debris left behind by time. It had form, alignment, a consistency that suggested design rather than accident. And almost immediately, a story that had lived in the background for decades came back into focus. The legend of the Nazi gold train, a train said to have been loaded in the final months of World War II, filled with valuables, and then hidden before it could be captured. For years, the story existed in that uncertain space between rumor and possibility. It had just enough detail to feel real, but not enough evidence to be taken seriously. Because the idea itself didn't make sense. A train that large, carrying something valuable, doesn't simply disappear. It leaves tracks, records, witnesses, something that anchors it to reality. And yet, no confirmed trace had ever been found. Which is why the scan changed everything. Because now there was something physical, something measurable, something that didn't belong underground unless it had been placed there intentionally. And that forced a shift in thinking. The question was no longer whether the legend existed, it was whether the legend had been pointing to something real all along, something buried deep enough that it had remained hidden, not just for years, but for generations. To understand why that possibility carries weight, you have to look at the final phase of World War II, not as a series of battles, but as a moment of rapid collapse. As Allied forces advanced, Nazi leadership began moving assets out of reach. Gold reserves, stolen artwork, sensitive documents, anything that held value was either relocated or concealed. Entire operations were built around secrecy. Underground tunnels were expanded, hidden storage sites were established, and transportation systems were used not just for movement, but for disappearance. Within that context, the idea of a train carrying valuable cargo doesn't feel exaggerated, it feels consistent with the strategy of the time. Reports began to circulate of a train leaving the area near what is now Walbrzych, heading toward a region known for its underground infrastructure. The terrain itself supported the possibility. This wasn't open land, it was an area with hills, rock formations, and documented tunnel systems, some of which were unfinished or never fully explored after the war. And then, at some point along that route, the train was said to have vanished. Not derailed. Not captured. Not recorded at a destination. It simply ceased to exist in any official capacity. Over time, the story evolved, shaped by speculation and fragments of testimony. Some believed the train carried gold reserves. Others suggested it held artwork taken from across Europe. There were even claims that it contained documents, information that was meant to be hidden permanently as the war came to an end. But without physical evidence, those ideas remained unconfirmed. They became part of a narrative that was repeated, adjusted, and eventually pushed aside as something that couldn't be proven. Until something appeared beneath the ground, in a place where no one expected to find it, and suddenly the story no longer felt distant. After the 2015 scan, interest moved quickly from curiosity to action. The location was narrowed down near a railway line outside Walbrzych, and preparations for excavation began. Ground-penetrating radar had indicated a large object, elongated, consistent in structure, and positioned in a way that suggested it wasn't random. The data didn't confirm a train, but it suggested something significant enough to justify investigation. And for a brief period, the story shifted from legend to possibility. Media attention increased, specialists were brought in, and the idea that something could actually be uncovered became real. This wasn't speculation anymore, it was a site with coordinates, data, and a measurable anomaly beneath the surface. But as excavation progressed, the certainty began to weaken. The initial readings, while compelling, were not definitive. Layers of soil and rock complicated interpretation, and natural geological formations began to present alternative explanations for what had been detected. What once appeared to be a clear outline started to lose definition. The deeper the investigation went, the less precise the image became. And that's where the tension shifted again. Because the expectation had already been set. People were no longer asking whether something was there, they were waiting to see it. And when that confirmation didn't come, the narrative didn't collapse, it fractured. Eventually, the excavation was halted. No confirmed train. No recovered cargo. No visual proof that matched the scale of the original claim. But the anomaly itself didn't disappear. The readings still existed. The data still showed something unusual beneath the ground. And that's what made the situation more complicated than a simple failure. Because something had been detected, something large enough to trigger a full-scale search, and yet, whatever it was, remained out of reach. So what actually happened in that moment, and what does it leave behind now? The simplest explanation is that the scan was misinterpreted. That natural formations, when viewed through incomplete data, can create patterns that resemble man-made structures. And that possibility fits within known limitations of the technology. Ground-penetrating radar is powerful, but it isn't perfect. It relies on interpretation, and interpretation can be influenced by expectation. When you're looking for something specific, it becomes easier to see shapes that align with that idea. But that explanation doesn't fully resolve the situation. Because the historical context still supports the possibility that something was hidden in that region. The infrastructure existed. The movement of assets was documented. The urgency of concealment was real. And the absence of a confirmed record for certain transports leaves space for something unaccounted for. So you're left with two positions, both of which hold weight. One suggests that the entire discovery was a projection, data shaped into meaning by expectation. The other suggests that something is still there, buried deeper than expected, positioned in a way that hasn't been fully revealed. And that's what keeps this story active. Not because it has been proven, but because it hasn't been closed. Because once something is detected, it becomes difficult to dismiss it entirely. The question remains, not in the past, but in the present. Was it ever really there, or was it just close enough to being real that people couldn't let it go? Some things are hidden. Not because they can't be found, but because they were meant to disappear. And if this is the kind of mystery that stays with you, join us next time. Tilt and chill. Stay curious.